Warm greeting to all. This session we are going to discuss types of bearings. So, what are the types of bearings available? So, depending upon the direction of load to be supported. So, the two types of bearing, one is radial bearing and thrust bearing. So, in radial bearing, the load acts perpendicular to the direction of motion of the moving element as shown in the figure A and C. See this. So, the shaft placed, so the load is perpendicular to the direction of motion. And in thrust bearing, the load acts along the axis of the rotation. Here you can see this thrust load, so it is acting along the axis, but in case of radial, so the load is acting perpendicular to the axis. So this is two types of bearings depend upon the direction of load. So depend upon the nature of contact. So we'll have two types. One is sliding contact bearing, rolling contact bearing. So in a sliding contact bearing, the sliding takes place along the surface of contact between the moving element and the fixed element. So this type of bearing we call it as plane bearing. But in this case, so this is we call it as rolling contact bearing. The steel ball or roller placed in between the fixed element and the moving element. So the ball will rotate. So this is rolling contact bearing. So plane bearing, that is sliding contact bearing. So advantages: can handle high loads, quiet operation because no rolling element exists, require less space than anti-frictional bearing, low cost. Disadvantages: limited to low speed applications, require precise alignment, lubrication is essential for their performance. So these are the advantage and disadvantages of sliding contact bearing. And anti-frictional bearing, that is ball or roller bearing. Advantages: higher efficiency than plane bearing, can handle high speeds, can tolerate misalignment better than journal bearing. So the bearing types by rolling element: ball bearing, so the in between will have a balls, and a cylindrical roller bearing, a cylindrical roller bearing, and taper roller bearing, so the taper roller bearing, and spherical roller bearing, spherical roller bearing or ball bearing. So these are the different types of bearings in anti-frictional bearing. And this is a direction of axial load and radial load. So in case radial load is always perpendicular to the axis of the bearing, and axial load is always parallel to the axis of the bearing. So here you can see a thrust load or axial load, and this is a radial load. So this is about types of bearing. So the remaining topic we'll discuss in the next session. Thank you.